Hello Africa, welcome to Bite-Sized Democracy, a weekly show that focuses on issues around democracy on the African continent. This show looks at what's happening on the continent in fun, informative, bite-sized segments. Please do join us in conversation. Our hashtag is #BSDemocracy, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel, the African Democratic Institute. My guest for today is Melula Kimtembu, an elections expert. Today we'll be doing things a bit differently on the show. The show will be an overview of elections that are happening on the continent or that have already happened. Today we'll be focusing on South Africa, Gabon, and Zambia. Welcome to the show, MK.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we'll start with South Africa. South Africa had an election, local government elections on the 3rd of August. And things have really been shaken, like especially in the metros. Can you explain to us what's happening in South Africa?
No, so the question that most people have been asking is on the issue of coalitions, to say, first of all, what is a coalition and how does it work? And then with one of the main opposition parties, the EFF, saying they don't want to get into a coalition, instead they'll vote with the chosen other opposition party in different metros. So essentially what it means is, maybe let me just explain how a mayor is voted. So a mayor is voted by the council being the council members that are elected, whether through direct election, proportional representation, etc. So the EFF essentially says that it doesn't want to be part of sort of the mayoral committees, which rule with the mayor, but instead it will just vote so that the chosen opposition party, for instance in Joburg, which is the DA, would take the mayorship instead of the ruling ANC.
Okay, actually, it's very interesting that you bring up the voting. As far as I think many citizens are concerned, once we went to the ballot on the 3rd of August, we thought the voting was over. But now that the EFF doesn't want to go into coalition with the DA, there has to be another voting process. So who is involved in this voting when it comes to, when coalitions happen?
So there is a judicial body, obviously, and then you have the IEC. So in Joburg, for example, the local government representatives, sort of at this point, the people who are the potential mayors, will vote, and then IEC is a part of it, and then there's a judicial body as well. So those are the people who vote. So that's why there is need for some sort of coalition, because parties have to liaise together, have to vote together so that they get the most votes. So today, EFF, DA will vote together so that the ANC won't take the metro.
Okay, so what is the difference between going into coalition and then the EFF giving its votes to the DA? Why wouldn't the EFF go into coalition with the DA?
The difference is pretty simple. The difference is EFF is just voting with the DA so that the DA gets the most number of votes that they desire for them to get the mayorship. It means EFF won't be part of the committees that will rule in the metros and in the wards, etc. It will just vote and give that role to the DA.
Okay, so we've seen this happen already in Tshwane. I think the DA has managed to, the EFF voted with the DA in Tshwane, and in Nelson Mandela Bay as well. Is that the same case?
Yeah, basically the same.
Okay, and then we move on to Zambia. It was a really hotly contested election, and election results took a long time to come out. Does that mean rigging? We need to speak about all these things.
Yeah.
Can you let us know what happened in Zambia?
So there were a lot of issues in Zambia prior to the election. About 133 people died during clashes on the street between political parties, and then there were also problems during the election and post the election. So during the election, the EU observers were not allowed into the verification center for some reason. And then the opposition leader was also not allowed access to the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. And then before the election, you had issues where the government was passing laws quickly. One of the laws was immunity for election commission members, which is kind of problematic, because why do they need immunity? What are they being immune from? So those are all issues that happened with the election. But the delay, obviously, people thinking we can't access the verification center, you are delaying the result, are you cooking the outcome, etc. So those are one of the issues. We have seen this across the continent in most countries. So it's one of those typical irregularities, but then they get the stamp of approval from the AU, etc.
Actually, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because the EU and the AU observers all came out and said the elections were free and fair, but they had no access to, it's very interesting how they would come to that conclusion.
Yeah, the other issue is there is no mechanism really to, first of all, denounce an election, and second of all, do something about it. So that on the side of the AU needs to be sorted. What's the criteria for us to denounce an election? I know there's a framework of the AU, but is that framework followed to the T, and what happens if countries don't follow that? And then who sponsors the rerun of the election in case like that? So those are issues that have to be dealt with before we can talk about AU actually doing something about an election.
Speaking of the Zambian opposition, they said they were going to contest the election results. Has there been any progress or any information on that?
Yeah, so the opposition has actually filed a complaint with the court, with the Constitutional Court. And then that means the inauguration, which was supposed to happen 3 weeks after the election, won't happen anymore until the court hears the matter. So hopefully that works, but there have been also appointments before the election to the Constitutional Court of people who are seen to sort of be on the side of the incumbent. So we'll see how that goes, but it's bound to be a contentious issue as well.
Yeah, I think we need to keep a close eye on Zambia. We need to keep our viewers updated as to what's happening. Then we move on to Gabon, that's having an election on the 27th of August, which will also be highly contested. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Gabon is pretty interesting. Their history, I think, is the most important one, where the father of the incumbent ruled since 1967. So opposition is trying to break that cycle now, to say let's move to a democracy, not something which now sort of looks like a family monarchy. So the recent developments, 27, almost out of 50 opposition parties have went behind Jinping, the former chairperson of the AU. It's a good development when it comes to a coalition trying to unseat the incumbent. Hopefully it works, but the Electoral Commission needs also to do a bit of reforms. They are also crying about term limits. One of the things that Mr. Ping wants to institute is term limits. So hopefully they win, and hopefully they drive Gabon to a democracy.
I think there's about less than 6 days till this election. Do you think any of the reforms, like the Electoral Commission, term limits, do you think any of them will be able to be slotted in, or do you have to happen after the election?
Yeah, that's just the wish of opposition. It won't happen clearly in the next few days. We could have almost a Zambia situation where opposition is not happy, because in the previous 2009 election, there was also a bit of contestation and nothing happened with that. But hopefully this time opposition will take up the matter, and then citizens will be behind opposition, whether it's in protests, because sometimes things change only from the streets, which is sort of radical. But we have seen that sometimes to get democracy, you need actually to demand it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today, MK. Please do join us next week for another fan-packed, informative show. We'd like to congratulate all the Olympians who went for the Olympics and brought us medals and pride to the African continent. God bless you, Africa.